On a routine flight, a young black girl endures a public humiliation so raw it exposes the deep fissures of an unjust system. The searing memory of her Tasliel becomes a silent scream, hinting at secrets and betrayals that lie just beneath the surface. Her shattered dignity sparks a mystery that compels every reader to uncover the hidden truths behind the spectacle. Watch until the end to see how this incredible story unfolds, and let us know what time you're watching today. Imani stared out of the small oval window of the airplane as the sky turned a deep, troubled gray. The clouds drifted slowly, each one a silent messenger of her own inner turmoil. Today, the world outside seemed as heavy as the thoughts swirling in her mind. Every detail of the journey had already begun to feel laden with unspoken tension, and as she clutched her worn leather notebook close to her heart, she could not shake the feeling that something important was about to change. She had always loved flying. The hum of the engines, the quiet murmur of passengers, even the soft clatter of seat belts. It was a small world in the sky where, for a few precious hours, everyday worries seemed to fall away. But this flight felt different. There was a crispness in the air, a kind of cold, hard certainty that not everything was as it seemed. The overhead lights cast long, shifting shadows along the narrow aisles, and the muted conversation of nearby travelers did little to drown out the low, persistent thrum of her own heartbeat. Imani's thoughts wandered to memories of her childhood, to stories her mother used to tell about brave souls who faced great adversity and emerged stronger. She remembered those tales with bittersweet fondness, though today they only deepened the ache inside her. The notebook in her hands was filled with such memories, sketches of hope and dreams carefully inscribed in fading ink. It was her sanctuary, a record of both her past and her promise for the future. Yet now, in this moment of quiet anticipation, even that comfort seemed distant. Across the narrow aisle, Celeste moved with an air of quiet efficiency. Dressed in a pristine uniform, her smile was fixed, though there was a strange coldness behind her eyes. Celeste's steps were measured and precise, as if each movement was dictated by a secret agenda. As she passed by Imani, the stranger's eyes briefly met hers. In that fleeting glance, Imani sensed something unsettling, a flicker of recognition, perhaps even disdain. It was as if Celeste saw in her not a fellow traveler, but a challenge to an order she had long taken for granted. The plane's atmosphere grew heavier with unspoken words. Imani's heart pounded in her chest, a steady reminder of both her vulnerability and her inner strength. She took a slow, deliberate breath and returned her gaze to the window, trying to find solace in the shifting patterns of the clouds. The soft hum of the engines was suddenly interrupted by a hushed murmur that rippled down the aisle, a sound that hinted at a disturbance soon to come. Without warning, Celeste stopped beside Imani's seat. Her voice, though measured and soft, carried an edge that cut through the gentle background noise. "Miss," she said, her tone polite yet laced with an undercurrent of authority that left no room for debate. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Imani closed her notebook slowly, as if sealing away the delicate memories within, and met Celeste's eyes with a steady, if uncertain, calm. "Of course," she replied quietly, her voice carrying a hint of both curiosity and caution. For a long moment, the space between them seemed to stretch, filled with unspoken accusations and hidden agendas. The soft overhead lighting seemed to flicker, as if in anticipation of what was to come. Imani's heart began to beat faster as she sensed that this was not a simple conversation, but the prelude to an event that would forever alter her path. Celeste's hand tightened around the edge of a clipboard as she spoke, her words carefully measured, yet carrying a weight that seemed to bend the very air around them. "There appears to be a misunderstanding," she began slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Rules must be followed strictly on this flight for the safety and comfort of all our passengers." Imani's eyes narrowed slightly. "I have followed every instruction," she said softly, her tone steady but laced with an inner hurt that she tried hard to hide. "If there is a problem, I would like to understand what it is." The exchange was brief, yet it held a tension that was palpable. Around them, the other passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their eyes darting between the two women as if trying to decipher the source of the disturbance. In that charged moment, time seemed to slow. Imani felt as if she were standing at the edge of a great precipice, where one misstep could lead to a plunge into unknown depths. Then, without any further warning, Celeste acted. In one swift, almost mechanical motion, she delivered a forceful kick aimed at Imani's side. The blow came so quickly that Imani had no time to react. The impact sent a shockwave through her body, a sudden, searing pain that blurred her vision and stole the breath from her lungs. For a split second, the world around her slowed into a surreal, nightmarish sequence of images. The shocked faces of her fellow passengers, the confused, unyielding expression on Celeste's face, and the scattering of the precious notebook she held so dear. Imani's body jerked backward, and in that disorienting moment, her thoughts became a jumbled mix of shock, humiliation, and a deep, burning anger. The notebook slipped from her grasp, tumbling to the floor, its pages fluttering like wounded birds desperate to escape. In the blink of an eye, the comforting cocoon of her memories and dreams had been shattered by a single, unprovoked act of cruelty. The air in the cabin was suddenly filled with a heavy silence, a silence that spoke of injustice and the sting of betrayal. For a long moment, Imani simply sat there, her eyes wide with disbelief, her body trembling as the pain slowly subsided. In that silence, the weight of what had just happened pressed down on her like a storm cloud. Slowly, she gathered her scattered belongings, each movement deliberate, as if trying to reclaim control over a situation that had spiraled beyond her command. Her mind raced with questions that had no immediate answers. Why had Celeste acted so harshly? What had she done to deserve such an outburst? And more painfully, how was it that in a place that was supposed to be safe, a place where the mundane routine of travel was meant to offer escape and solace, she had become a target? Outside the narrow confines of the airplane, the world continued its relentless march. The plane began its descent toward the runway, the gentle hum of the engines now punctuated by the low murmur of concerned passengers. Yet for Imani, time had taken on a different pace, a slow, torturous drag filled with raw emotion and the dawning realization that her life was no longer the quiet narrative she had once known. As the aircraft taxied onto the runway, Imani's mind replayed the incident over and over. The pain was physical, yes, but there was something deeper, a wound inflicted on her very sense of identity and worth. In that painful moment, she felt exposed, as if every flaw and every doubt had been laid bare before the scrutinizing eyes of strangers. The act of being kicked was not just a physical blow, it was an assault on her dignity, an attack that left her soul bruised and questioning the fairness of the world. Outside the plane, the cool evening air greeted her with a sobering clarity. The terminal loomed ahead, its glass and steel facade reflecting a mosaic of flickering lights and darkened corners. Here, in this liminal space between the confined chaos of the aircraft and the wide, uncertain world beyond, Imani found herself at a crossroads. Every step she took on the hard, cold pavement echoed with the silent promise of change, an unspoken vow that she would not let this moment define her. As she walked slowly toward the terminal, each step a deliberate act of defiance against the injustice she had just endured, the rain began to fall gently at first, then with increasing persistence. The droplets mingled with the tears she refused to shed openly, each one a small testament to her resilience. The rain washed over her, soft yet relentless, as if nature itself was offering both a lament and a renewal. The gray sky overhead mirrored the heavy emotions inside her, yet within that storm, a spark of determination was igniting, a small flame of resolve that would soon grow into a blazing fire. Imani's eyes, still filled with the shock of the recent assault, now began to harden with resolve. The painful memory of the kick, the fall from the seat, and the humiliation in front of so many witnesses were all converging into a single, unyielding thought. she would not be defined by this moment of cruelty. As she stepped forward, her gaze drifted to the scattered pages of her notebook, lying abandoned near the aircraft door. Those pages, full of her dreams, her hopes, and her memories, were not lost. They were a reminder of who she was and who she was meant to become. In that quiet, rain-soaked moment, Imani made a silent vow to herself. She would rise above the injustice, not through vengeance, but through the strength of her spirit and the truth of her heritage. The world around her, with its cold concrete and reflective glass, seemed to echo that promise. Every droplet of rain, every flickering light in the terminal, bore witness to a transformation that had only just begun. The pain of the moment was real and cutting, but it was also the catalyst for something greater, a turning point that would shape the course of her destiny. The terminal was bustling now with the soft murmur of voices and the rustle of hurried footsteps. Yet amidst the activity, Imani felt as though she were moving in slow motion, each step deliberate, as if treading on sacred ground. The memory of the airplane, the echo of the insult, and the image of Celeste's unyielding face were all locked in her mind. It was a moment that felt both deeply personal and universally significant, a reminder that even in the modern world of routine travel and daily commutes, moments of profound injustice could spark a transformation that reached far beyond the confines of an airplane cabin. As she reached the entrance of the terminal, Imani paused at the glass doors, taking a long, steadying breath. The reflection that stared back at her was not merely a woman who had suffered an attack. It was the image of someone who was ready to reclaim her narrative, to stand tall against a world that had tried to diminish her worth. The rain outside continued to fall softly, a quiet accompaniment to the rising storm within her. In that reflection, she saw not the fear or the hurt, but the quiet power of resolve, the determination to transform pain into purpose. Inside the terminal, the warmth of artificial light and the hum of daily life contrasted sharply with the cold cruelty of the airplane incident. Yet even here, Imani sensed that the forces that had set this chain of events into motion were not done with her. There was an undercurrent of tension in the air, an invisible thread connecting the seemingly random moments of cruelty to a larger, more complex tapestry of betrayal and hidden truths. She knew, deep in her heart, that this was only the beginning of a journey that would test her in ways she had never imagined. With each step deeper into the terminal, the weight of the incident transformed into a determined resolve. Imani thought of her family's legacy, of the dreams they had nurtured, and of the promise she had once made to herself to never let injustice go unanswered. The shock of the attack had given way to a burning need for answers, to a desire to reclaim what was rightfully hers. The world, with its bustling activity and indifferent routine, had suddenly become a battleground, a place where the fight for dignity and truth was just beginning. As she found a quiet corner to sit and gather her thoughts, Imani clutched the remains of her scattered notebook. The pages, though ruffled and stained with the remnants of her pain, still held the words that defined her spirit. In that moment of solitude, the soft hum of the terminal faded into the background, replaced by the steady beat of her own heart, a rhythm that promised resilience and renewal. The memory of the kick, the harsh reality of the flight, and the overwhelming sense of injustice mingled with a new, emerging hope. It was a hope that whispered of change, of a future where she would not be silenced or diminished. Outside, the world continued its relentless pace, unaware of the quiet revolution taking shape in the heart of one woman. The rain, the gray sky, and the soft glow of streetlights all bore witness to this turning point, a moment where the cruelty of the past would be transformed into the strength of a new beginning. Imani knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, that the forces which had tried to break her would not easily let her reclaim her power. But in that quiet moment of resolve, as she sat alone in the warmth of the terminal, she made a promise to herself. She would find the truth hidden behind the layers of cruelty, and she would rise above it all. With a final, determined glance at the reflection in the glass doors, Imani stepped forward into the unknown. The journey that lay ahead was uncertain, filled with shadows and unspoken dangers, yet it was also illuminated by the promise of a future defined by justice and personal redemption. In that moment, every raindrop, every flicker of light, and every whispered memory of her past converged into a single, powerful truth. She was ready to fight for her dignity, for her legacy, and for the life she knew she was meant to lead. And so, as the terminal doors slid open and the cool night air embraced her once more, Imani walked forward with a quiet determination. The events of the flight, the pain of the kick, and the haunting image of Celeste's unyielding expression were now part of her story, a story that was just beginning to unfold. Each step echoed the promise that no act of cruelty, no matter how sudden or devastating, could ultimately extinguish the light of a determined soul. In that moment, beneath a sky heavy with rain and uncertainty, Imani embraced the challenge before her. The quiet strength within her was like a small flame, ready to ignite into a blaze of change. With the memory of the attack etched into her mind and the legacy of her past urging her onward, she moved forward into the waiting night, into a future where every hardship would become the stepping stone to reclaiming her rightful place in a world that had, until now, tried to keep her down. Imani sat in a quiet corner of the terminal, her mind still echoing with the shock of the assault on the airplane. The cold drizzle outside had seeped into her bones, yet its persistence mirrored the storm raging inside her. As she cradled the battered remains of her notebook, her eyes wandered over the busy terminal. Travelers hurried by, their faces lit by the glow of phone screens and the reflection of neon signs. To everyone else, it was just another evening at the airport. But for Imani, nothing would ever be the same again. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to gather her thoughts. The humiliation of being struck so suddenly and without warning still stung deeply. Every detail of the incident replayed in her mind. The shock in her eyes, the cold precision of Celeste's action, and the way the world had momentarily slowed down, as if time itself was acknowledging the cruelty of that single act. Yet, amid the swirling emotions, a new disturbance began to take shape, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift that hinted at something even more unsettling than the pain she had just endured. While she struggled to steady her breathing, her phone vibrated sharply in her pocket. She pulled it out and noticed a text message from an unknown number. The screen read simply, "Meet me at Gate 3 in 5 minutes. I have something you need to see." The message was curt and mysterious, lacking any signature or explanation. For a moment, Imani hesitated. Who could be reaching out to her at a time when she felt vulnerable? And why now, so soon after the incident? Yet, deep inside, a spark of curiosity, and perhaps a desperate need for answers, overrode her instinct to ignore it. She closed her eyes and took a slow, measured breath. The pain in her side had dulled to a persistent throb, but it was nothing compared to the uncertainty that now gnawed at her. Was this message connected to the strange turn of events on the flight, or was it just an unrelated coincidence in an already chaotic day? With no clear answer, Imani decided that if there was any possibility of understanding what had happened, she would follow the lead. After a few moments of silent resolve, she tucked her phone back into her pocket, gathered her few belongings, and began to make her way toward Gate 3. The terminal lights flickered above her head, their steady hum a stark contrast to the turbulent thoughts that swirled inside her. As she walked, every step felt both heavy and purposeful, as if the ground beneath her was urging her onward into the unknown. At Gate 3, the area was dimly lit, quieter than the bustling corridors of the terminal. Few passengers lingered here, and the soft murmur of distant announcements provided a backdrop to the rhythmic tapping of her shoes on the polished floor. Near the waiting area, a man in a dark coat and a flat cap leaned casually against a pillar. His presence was unassuming, yet there was something in the way his eyes, sharp and observant, followed her movements. When Imani reached the gate, the man straightened and stepped forward. "Imani," he asked softly, his voice carrying an accent that was hard to place. There was no formality in his tone, only a calm urgency that made her pause. "Yes," she replied cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" The stranger offered a small, enigmatic smile. "My name is Aaron. I know this might sound odd, but I've been trying to reach you. Please, come with me to a quieter spot." His eyes darted around as if wary of being overheard, and Imani sensed that there was more to this encounter than a simple conversation. Though apprehensive, Imani's need for answers outweighed her caution. She nodded slowly and followed him to a small seating area tucked away near a service door. Once they were seated, Aaron leaned forward and lowered his voice. "What happened on that flight wasn't a random act of cruelty," he began, his tone measured yet intense. "There are forces at work here that go far beyond a single moment of anger." Imani's eyes widened as she listened, her pulse quickening. "What do you mean? Who would do something like that?" Aaron paused for a moment, as if choosing his words with care. "I can't reveal everything just yet," he said. "But know this. The attack on you was not an isolated incident. There are people who stand to gain from your humiliation. There is a plan, a design that has been in motion long before you stepped onto that plane." Her mind raced. The idea that the assault might have been orchestrated, that it might have been part of something much larger and more sinister, sent a chill down her spine. "Are you saying someone set this up? That I was deliberately targeted?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly with a mix of fear and anger. Aaron nodded slowly. "Yes, I believe so. And I think you deserve to know why. The airline you are connected to, the legacy of your family, is at stake. There are hidden agendas within its walls, agreements made in shadows, betrayals that have been carefully concealed. Your father's legacy, as you know it, has always been more than just a business. It was a symbol, a beacon of hope and justice. But somewhere along the way, that purpose was twisted." Imani felt a heavy weight settle on her chest. The familiar sense of injustice was now compounded by the possibility that the betrayal ran deeper than she had ever imagined. "Who is behind this?" she pressed, her eyes searching Aaron's face for any sign of deceit. "Names are dangerous right now," Aaron replied, his gaze lowering as if to protect both of them from unseen threats. "But I can tell you that those who orchestrated this are high up. They have power, and they will stop at nothing to preserve their positions, even if it means sacrificing those who stand in their way." A sudden, distant announcement echoed through the terminal, drawing their attention for a brief moment. When the sound faded, Aaron continued, his voice barely above a murmur. "I believe Celeste's actions were only a small part of this larger scheme. She might have been acting under orders, or perhaps manipulated by those who promised her something in return. I don't know all the details yet, but I can tell you that the events of today are just the beginning." Imani's thoughts spun in a whirlwind of confusion and determination. It was one thing to endure a personal attack, but to now learn that her entire identity and her family's legacy were under threat from hidden, powerful adversaries. It was almost too much to bear. Yet, amidst the chaos of her emotions, a new sense of purpose began to take shape. If there was a conspiracy behind the attack, then uncovering the truth became not only a personal quest for justice, but a mission to reclaim the honor of everything her father had built. Aaron reached into his coat pocket and produced a small envelope. "Take this," he said, sliding it across the table to her. "It contains some documents and contact information. I believe these will help you understand the scope of what's happening. But be careful. The people involved are very dangerous. Trust no one until you're sure of their loyalty." With trembling fingers, Imani accepted the envelope. She looked down at it, her mind racing as she wondered what secrets lay hidden within its contents. The envelope felt like a tangible link to a hidden world of power struggles and betrayal, a world where the values she held dear were under constant assault. "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly, her voice laced with suspicion and curiosity. Aaron's eyes softened for a brief moment, and he gave a slight, reassuring nod. "Because I believe in justice, and because I believe that your story and your father's legacy deserves the truth. I have my own reasons for being involved, reasons that align with what you stand for. For now, trust that I am on your side." Imani studied him, searching for any sign of deceit. There was an honesty in his eyes, a raw determination that mirrored her own. Though she couldn't fully trust him yet, she realized that this unexpected encounter might be the only lead she had to untangle the web of deceit that had ensnared her life. The conversation was interrupted by a sudden burst of activity at the far end of the terminal. A group of sharply dressed individuals passed by, their eyes scanning the area with an intensity that made Imani's skin prickle. Aaron's expression turned grave as he watched them approach. "They're here," he murmured under his breath. "We need to move." Instinctively, Imani gathered her things and rose from her seat. The strangers did not look like ordinary travelers. There was an air of authority about them, and their purposeful stride suggested they were not there by chance. As they neared, Aaron leaned closer and whispered, "These men are part of the same network that set today's events in motion. They are here to ensure that no one uncovers too much. We must act quickly." Before Imani could ask any questions, Aaron guided her through a maze of corridors that led to a less frequented part of the terminal. Their footsteps echoed softly against the tiled floor, each step resonating with the urgency of their flight. The atmosphere was charged with tension, and Imani's senses were on high alert as she tried to piece together the fragments of the mystery that now consumed her. In a small, dimly lit alcove away from the main flow of passengers, Aaron paused and turned to her. "Listen carefully," he said, his voice steady despite the palpable tension. "The envelope I gave you contains documents that reveal irregularities in the airline's finances, secret communications, and even references to covert meetings. I suspect that there is a betrayal at the highest level, a betrayal that could topple not just a company, but the very ideals your father stood for." Imani's mind raced as she tried to process his words. Every instinct told her that the situation was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The betrayal was not simply a personal affront. It was systemic, rooted in corruption that had festered for years. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid that speaking too loudly might alert the wrong ears. Aaron's eyes bore into hers with an intensity that left no room for doubt. "You need to learn everything you can. Read the documents, verify the information, and gather allies. There are people within the company who are tired of the secrecy and the lies. You are one of them, whether you realize it or not." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "But be careful. The people behind this will stop at nothing to maintain their grip on power. Trust must be earned, and every step you take could be monitored." Outside the alcove, the murmurs of the terminal had resumed their usual rhythm, but to Imani, it all felt like the calm before a storm. Her thoughts churned as she clutched the envelope, feeling the weight of its contents and the gravity of the secret it promised to reveal. The encounter with Aaron had shaken her to the core, yet it had also ignited a spark of determination. The pain of earlier was slowly transforming into a burning resolve, a determination to expose the hidden forces that sought to silence her and tarnish her family's legacy. For the next few minutes, they remained in the secluded alcove, hidden away from prying eyes. Aaron continued, "There is a name you should remember. It is whispered in the corridors of power, a name that represents the betrayal of integrity. I cannot say more now, but once you have the documents, you will understand. The clock is ticking, Imani. Every minute you delay gives them more power." His words were cryptic, yet they resonated with a sense of urgency that made Imani's heart race even faster. She nodded, swallowing hard as the magnitude of her situation became undeniable. The peaceful routine of her earlier life was now shattered, replaced by a dangerous and unpredictable journey into the dark heart of corporate betrayal. In that moment, Imani realized that the attack on the airplane was not merely a random act of violence. It was the spark that had set a much larger fire into motion. And she was now at the very center of it. Aaron stood up and offered his hand. "Come with me," he said, leading her toward another exit. "I have a safe place where you can go over these documents and make your next move." With no time to waste and no choice but to follow this new lead, Imani took his hand. The cold reality of her situation pressed in on her, but the fire of resolve burned brighter than ever. They hurried down a side corridor, the sounds of footsteps and indistinct voices growing fainter as they put distance between themselves and the main terminal. In a small room tucked away behind a service door, Aaron motioned for Imani to sit at a rickety table under a single overhead light. He then carefully opened the envelope and spread its contents before her. There were several printed documents, a few handwritten notes, and a small flash drive. Each item was marked with dates, figures, and names that were foreign to her yet ominously familiar in their implications of corruption and deceit. Imani picked up one of the documents, her eyes scanning the details. It appeared to be an internal report, one that outlined questionable transactions and unexplained expenses within the airline's accounts. Her heart sank as she recognized certain financial figures that had once been a source of pride for her family's company. "How could this be?" she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and sorrow. Aaron leaned in, his expression somber. "It's been happening for years. The very foundation of the company has been eroded by greed and secrecy. Your father fought for every honest deal, for every fair transaction, but he was betrayed by those closest to him. This document is just one piece of the puzzle. There's much more hidden in these files, and once you understand the full extent of it, you'll see that today's events are only a small part of a much larger conspiracy." The gravity of his words weighed on Imani. Each document she read deepened her sense of betrayal. Not only had she been personally attacked, but the institution she had once admired was built on lies and manipulation. Yet, amid the despair, a fierce determination began to emerge. If the very core of the company was corrupt, then exposing it would mean reclaiming her father's honor and restoring the truth that had been hidden for so long. As the minutes slipped by in that dimly lit room, Imani's mind raced with plans and possibilities. She felt the heavy responsibility of knowing secrets that powerful people would do anything to keep buried. The safe place Aaron had brought her to was a temporary refuge, a haven from prying eyes, but it was also the starting point for a dangerous mission. Every document, every note, was a piece of evidence that would help her unravel the tangled web of deceit. Aaron watched her intently, gauging her reaction. "I know it's a lot to take in," he said softly, "but you must decide now. Will you stand by and let them continue to manipulate and destroy what was once built on honor, or will you fight for the truth, even if it means risking everything?" Imani's gaze hardened as she looked at the scattered papers before her. "I will fight," she said firmly, her voice carrying a clarity that surprised even her. "I won't let them erase my father's legacy. I won't let this betrayal go unpunished." A brief smile of approval crossed Aaron's face. "Then, we must act quickly. I have contacts, people who have been gathering evidence for years. They are prepared to help, but we must move carefully. The next steps will be dangerous, and you will be exposed to risks you cannot yet imagine." The conversation was interrupted by a faint noise at the door, a soft knock that sent a jolt of anxiety through Imani. Aaron's eyes narrowed as he rose to answer it. In that moment, Imani realized how fragile their safety truly was. The knock was hesitant at first, then more insistent, as if the person on the other side was equally desperate for entry. Aaron moved to the door and cautiously opened it just a crack. A pair of eyes peeked in, a young woman with determined features and a look of urgency. "I'm Lucia," she said in a hushed tone. "I've been sent to help you." Her voice carried a quiet authority, and for a moment, Imani felt a small measure of relief. Another ally meant that she wasn't entirely alone in this fight. Aaron nodded at Lucia and ushered her in quickly before closing the door behind her. Lucia took a brief glance at the documents spread out on the table, her expression darkening with concern. "We don't have much time," she said. "They're tightening security around the terminal. The people behind this conspiracy are on high alert." Imani's pulse quickened again. Every new piece of information, every subtle hint, drove home the reality that she was now caught in a battle far larger than her own personal suffering. The safe haven of that small room now felt like the front line of a covert war, a war where every secret uncovered was a step toward reclaiming what had been stolen. Lucia continued, "There's more information I can share later, but for now, you must understand that the betrayal runs deep. Some of the names in these documents are connected to long-standing alliances that predate even your father's time. The corruption has roots that spread across many layers of the company and beyond." Imani listened, absorbing every word as if it were a lifeline. The inciting force of the day's events was no longer just about a personal attack. It was about exposing a vast network of deceit that had eroded the very soul of the organization her family had built. The determination that had started as a flicker of defiance now burned with the intensity of a beacon. As the three of them pored over the documents in that cramped room, Imani felt a mixture of fear and empowerment. The catalyst for the disruption of her life was not merely the act of violence she had suffered. It was the revelation that she had been deliberately set up to fail, that her pain was orchestrated to silence her legacy. The hidden motives and potential betrayals hinted at by Aaron were now undeniable, and the challenge before her seemed both insurmountable and utterly necessary. In the hushed hours that followed, plans began to take shape. Imani resolved that she would verify every piece of evidence, reach out to anyone who might be willing to stand against the corruption, and ultimately bring the truth to light, even if it meant risking everything. The safe room, with its dim light and scattered papers, became the birthplace of her resolve. Every document was a call to arms, every note a reminder that the fight for justice was not just personal, it was universal. Outside, the sounds of the terminal grew louder once again as security measures were tightened. The trio knew they could not linger indefinitely in that small refuge. With Lucia's assistance, they gathered the documents, secured the flash drive, and prepared to leave. Every step away from that room felt like a step into a dangerous unknown, but Imani no longer felt the crippling uncertainty of the earlier moments. Instead, she felt a fierce determination, a promise to herself that she would expose the betrayal, no matter how deep it was hidden. As they exited through a service door into a dimly lit corridor, Imani glanced back once at the room that had become her temporary haven. The corridor was quiet, the only sound the soft echo of their footsteps and the distant hum of the airport. In that quiet space, she allowed herself a moment to reflect on the journey ahead. The events of the day had shattered her previous sense of normalcy, leaving in its place a dangerous clarity. She now understood that her life and the legacy of her family were enmeshed in a struggle against a force that would stop at nothing to remain hidden. The unknown number that had sent her the message, the mysterious figure of Aaron, and the sudden appearance of Lucia all signified that there were allies out there, people who believed in truth and were willing to risk everything to uncover it. And though the danger was now palpable, Imani also recognized that she was not as alone as she had feared. The inciting incident of that fateful flight had set in motion a chain of events that would irrevocably change her path, and she was now determined to follow it wherever it might lead. As they moved through the corridors of the terminal, the distant sounds of routine life served as a stark contrast to the high stakes of their secret meeting. Imani clutched the envelope and the documents close to her heart, every step forward a silent vow that she would reclaim her rightful place and expose the betrayal that had undermined everything she held dear. With each passing moment, the hidden motives and covert plans began to reveal themselves, like the faint outlines of a picture gradually coming into focus. In that long, uncertain journey through dimly lit hallways and guarded entrances, Imani realized that the path ahead would be fraught with peril. Yet, as the cool night air brushed against her face outside the terminal, she felt a spark of hope. The inciting incident that had once thrown her world into chaos was now fueling a fire within her, a fire that promised to burn away the lies and corruption, leaving only the truth in its wake. Standing in the shadow of the terminal's outer doors, Imani took a deep breath, her eyes reflecting the determination of someone who had been pushed to the edge and found a reason to fight back. The betrayal that had been hinted at in the documents was real, and it was vast. But so was her resolve. With the help of her newfound allies and the evidence now in her hands, she was ready to step into the storm, determined to reclaim not only her dignity, but the legacy of a man who had fought for justice until his last breath. And so, as the night deepened around her, and the hum of the city merged with the quiet promise of a new beginning, Imani made a silent vow. No matter how treacherous the road ahead might be, she would uncover every hidden secret, expose every betrayal, and restore the truth that had been so long buried in shadows. The inciting incident of today was not an end. It was the beginning of a relentless pursuit for justice, a journey that would test her strength, her faith, and her commitment to the ideals her father had once championed. With that final thought echoing in her mind, Imani stepped forward into the uncertain darkness, the documents and the weight of hidden motives guiding her every step. The journey had truly begun, and there was no turning back now. Imani's footsteps echoed along the quiet corridors of the safe house as she tried to steady her racing heart. The events of the past few hours swirled in her mind like a dark, relentless storm. Every document, every whispered word from Aaron and Lucia deepened the mystery, and with it, the weight of betrayal that pressed upon her soul. She had come to understand that nothing in her life was as it seemed. The legacy of her father, the company she had once held close to her heart, was now shrouded in secrets and deceit. Yet, amid the darkness, a fragile spark of determination began to glow within her. Inside a modest room with peeling paint and a single, flickering lamp, Imani sat at an old wooden table. The envelope Aaron had given her lay open before her, its contents spread out like pieces of a puzzle that she desperately needed to solve. Lucia sat quietly in a worn armchair nearby, her eyes fixed on Imani as if silently urging her to uncover the truth. The documents detailed suspicious financial transactions, hidden meetings, and names that Imani had never expected to see associated with her father's trusted circle. Each page was a dagger twisting deeper into the legacy she had thought was built on honor. "Look at this," Imani said softly, her voice trembling as she pointed to a document filled with cryptic numbers and dates. "These figures, they don't add up. My father always took pride in the integrity of every deal he made. How could these numbers be here?" Lucia leaned forward, her tone gentle but firm. "It's the work of those who wanted to take control, to profit from what was once a noble dream. They've twisted everything, Imani. Your father's vision was hijacked by greed and secrecy long before you even knew about it." Imani's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she struggled to reconcile the man she remembered with the cold, calculated betrayal now unfolding before her. "I feel like I'm losing him all over again," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the dim light. "Every word I read is like another piece of the puzzle that tells me he was betrayed by those he trusted." Silence fell between them for a long moment as Imani wrestled with her swirling thoughts. Outside, the soft hum of the city at night seeped through the window, a reminder that life continued even in the midst of her personal chaos. But inside, time seemed to stretch indefinitely, each minute filled with raw introspection and a growing resolve to fight back. Lucia reached out and rested a hand on Imani's arm. "You're not alone in this," she said reassuringly. "We have others who believe in the truth. I've seen documents from inside the company, people who are as fed up with the corruption as you are. But you must be cautious. They are watching, and any misstep could be dangerous." Imani nodded, swallowing hard. "I know," she replied, her voice steadier now as she gathered herself. "But if I don't act, then my father's legacy will be lost forever. I owe it to him, and to everyone who believed in him, to expose this corruption." As she spoke, the room felt charged with an energy that was both unsettling and invigorating. In that moment, Imani realized that the attack on the airplane, the cold cruelty of Celeste, and the mysterious intervention of Aaron and Lucia were all part of a much larger design, a design meant to test her, to force her into a battle for justice. The sense of uncertainty that had plagued her for so long began to give way to a fierce inner strength, one born from the painful recognition that truth, no matter how deeply buried, could be unearthed. Over the next few hours, Imani pored over the documents, her eyes tracing every line, every figure, searching for the key that would unlock the full story. Between the numbers and names, she began to notice subtle patterns, a recurring signature in emails, unexplained transfers of funds, and secret meetings held under the guise of routine board discussions. With each new discovery, her heart pounded faster, a mix of anger and determination fueling her resolve. At one point, she found a series of handwritten notes tucked between the official reports. The notes were cryptic, hinting at meetings in dimly lit rooms and whispered alliances. One note in particular caught her eye. Trust is a fragile thing. Betrayal is its undoing. Watch for the one who smiles too easily. Imani's mind raced as she tried to connect the dots. Was this a warning? A clue that someone within her inner circle was playing a dangerous double game? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. Lucia, who had been quietly observing Imani's growing distress, finally spoke. "There's a name mentioned here repeatedly," she said, pointing to a reference in one of the reports. "It's someone who was once very close to your father, a man who is rumored to have been a pillar of integrity. But rumors have a way of twisting into something darker. It might be time to question everything you thought you knew." Imani paused, her mind reeling with the possibility. "You mean he might have been involved?" she asked in a hushed tone, the shock evident in her eyes. "I always believed he was a man of honor. Could it be that he was part of this right all along?" Lucia shook her head slowly. "I'm not saying that your father was corrupt, Imani, but even the best can be deceived by those around them. It's possible that someone close to him exploited his trust, turned his vision against him. And if that's the case, then the betrayal runs deeper than we imagined." The room fell silent once more as Imani wrestled with the implications. Every new piece of evidence challenged her cherished memories, forcing her to confront the possibility that her father's world was not as unblemished as she had always believed. The emotional stakes, already high from the assault on the flight, now soared to an almost unbearable level. Her mind was a battlefield where loyalty, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of truth clashed in a turbulent dance. After a long pause, Imani exhaled slowly, her gaze hardening with resolve. "I need to know the whole truth," she declared firmly. "I can't move forward if I'm still in the dark. I have to expose every secret, no matter how painful it is." Lucia offered a small, encouraging smile. "Then we start by verifying these documents," she said. "There are a few trusted contacts I can reach out to, people who work in the shadows of the company and have been gathering evidence for years. We need to connect the dots, piece together the network of betrayal, and bring everything to light." The conversation was interrupted by a sudden vibration of Imani's phone. She glanced at the screen and saw an unknown number flashing. Her hand trembled as she answered, uncertain whether this new call was friend or foe. "Hello," she said cautiously. A voice, calm and measured, answered. "Imani, it's me, Celeste." There was a pause, then the voice continued. "I know what you've been through today. I know you're looking for answers." The tone was soft yet carried a weight of remorse that made Imani's heart skip a beat. Imani's mind raced. Celeste, the woman who had struck her on the plane, was calling now? "Why are you calling me?" she asked, her voice a mix of anger and curiosity. Celeste's reply was measured, almost apologetic. "There's a lot you don't know. I acted because I was ordered to, but I've come to realize that I cannot stand by and watch this injustice continue. I want to help you, if you'll let me." Her words were laced with uncertainty, leaving Imani torn between her lingering anger and the possibility of unexpected alliance. For a long moment, Imani said nothing. The memories of the physical pain, the humiliation, and the betrayal of that moment on the plane fought against the glimmer of hope that perhaps Celeste was sincere. "Why should I trust you?" Imani finally demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. Celeste's silence on the line was palpable before she spoke again. "Because I too have been a victim of this system, of the very people who have twisted everything for their own gain. I know the names, the secrets, and I promise you, I will do everything in my power to make things right." Her tone was earnest, And for a fleeting second, Imani felt the stirrings of empathy. Hanging up, Imani felt the weight of the conversation settle over her. It was a dangerous game, trusting someone who had once inflicted pain. Yet, the truth was all that mattered now. And if Celeste truly wanted to help, then perhaps there was a chance to mend what had been broken. But even as she considered this possibility, a nagging voice in her heart urged caution. Trust was a fragile thing, and the stakes were too high to afford another betrayal. The rest of the night passed in a blur of restless planning and quiet determination. Imani and Lucia spent hours mapping out the connections hinted at in the documents. They cross-referenced names, dates, and figures, slowly constructing a web of deceit that reached into the highest echelons of the company. With every new link they uncovered, Imani felt both the sting of betrayal and the growing resolve to fight back. During a brief lull, Imani found herself alone by a window, staring out at the city lights that shimmered like distant stars. The night air was cool against her skin, and she closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel the raw emotion that churned within her. How did everything go so wrong? She whispered to herself. How could those I trusted so completely have let this rot take root? Her thoughts drifted back to the memory of her father, the man who had built the company with such passion and integrity. In her mind's eye, she saw him smiling, full of hope for a future where honesty and hard work reigned supreme. The contrast between that cherished image and the cold, brutal reality of corruption now stung deeply. The internal struggle was immense. The love and respect she had for her father battled against the painful truth that his legacy was now in jeopardy because of the actions of others. Yet, in that moment of introspection, Imani also felt a stirring of strength. I will not let his dream die, she vowed silently. I will find out who betrayed him and expose every secret no matter the cost. The resolve in her heart began to push back against the darkness of uncertainty, transforming her grief into a fierce determination to honor his memory. Her reverie was broken by the soft sound of Lucia's footsteps behind her. You're thinking too hard, Lucia said gently, her voice laced with concern. I know it hurts, but you can't lose yourself in the pain. We need you strong, Imani, for your father and for all those who still believe in the truth. Imani nodded, wiping away a stray tear. I'm trying, she admitted. Every piece of evidence I see, every lie uncovered, it feels like another wound. But I know that I have to keep moving forward. Her voice was firm now, resolute despite the pain. In the early hours of the morning, as the first light of dawn crept through the curtains of a safe house, Imani and Lucia gathered the documents and prepared to reach out to the contacts that Lucia had mentioned. The plan was simple yet fraught with peril. Verify the evidence, establish trustworthy alliances, and slowly dismantle the network of corruption from within. Each step would be dangerous, but Imani was ready to risk everything for the truth. Before they left, Imani took a moment to look at the scattered papers one last time. The documents were more than just evidence. They were the voice of her father's legacy, calling out for justice. This is our chance, she said softly, more to herself than to Lucia. This is how we make things right. As they stepped out into the cool morning air, the city around them was just beginning to wake up. The streets were quiet, the hustle of daily life yet to fully take hold. But for Imani, the world had already shifted. The safe house, the documents, the voices of betrayal and hope, they were all part of a new reality she was determined to reshape. With each step, she felt herself sinking deeper into a journey that was as much about self-discovery as it was about justice. Along the way, they met one of Lucia's trusted contacts, a soft-spoken man named Marcus, who had once worked in the lower ranks of the company's finance department. Marcus's eyes were filled with a mixture of regret and determination as he reviewed the documents. I saw things, he admitted quietly. I saw how decisions were made in the dark, how money was funneled away from the projects that truly mattered. I always wanted to speak up, but I was too afraid. His confession resonated with Imani. We can't be afraid anymore, she said, her voice strong and unwavering. It's time for the truth to come out. Marcus nodded slowly, and together they began to formulate a strategy to verify the remaining leads. Over cups of weak coffee in a small diner off the beaten path, Imani, Lucia, and Marcus exchanged whispered plans and guarded hopes. Every conversation was laced with tension, each word chosen carefully, for they all knew that one misstep could alert the conspirators who lurked in the shadows. Yet in the midst of this careful planning, Imani found moments of unexpected tenderness. A shared laugh over a memory of her father's quirky habits, a gentle squeeze of the hand from Lucia when the weight of the evidence became too much to bear. These small acts of connection reminded her that even in the darkness of betrayal, there was still hope and humanity. As the day progressed, Imani's internal struggles continued to manifest in quiet moments of reflection. Late in the afternoon, she found herself sitting alone on a park bench, the city's noise muted by the rustling of autumn leaves. The chill in the air matched the cold resolve building within her. "I must be strong," she whispered to herself. "Not just for me, but for him and for everyone who was wronged." The solitude allowed her to confront the duality of her emotions, the pain of betrayal and the fierce desire for redemption. In that silent conversation with her own heart, Imani realized that every scar was a reminder of what she had to fight for. That evening, as twilight fell and the sky shifted to a deep indigo, Imani and her newfound allies regrouped at a discreet location. The room was small and sparsely furnished, but it buzzed with a determined energy. Here, in the dim glow of a single overhead light, plans were laid out, and the next phase of their strategy was set in motion. Marcus, Lucia, and Imani huddled over maps, financial reports, and lists of names. Every piece of data was examined, every connection debated. The discussions were intense, with each revelation bringing them closer to the heart of the conspiracy. During one such discussion, Imani's thoughts turned inward again. "How did it come to this?" she asked quietly, her eyes fixed on the map before her. How could something that started with hope and integrity end in such betrayal? Her voice cracked with emotion, and for a moment, the room fell silent. Lucia reached out and gently touched her shoulder. "We may never have all the answers," she said softly, "but what we do know is that we have the power to change the future. Your father's legacy isn't lost. It's waiting to be reclaimed by you." Imani nodded slowly, taking in Lucia's words. The pain was still there, raw and unyielding, but it was tempered by a rising determination. "I will do whatever it takes," she promised, her voice resolute. "I will expose every lie, every hidden betrayal, until the truth shines through." That night, as the group dispersed with plans to meet again soon, Imani remained alone for a long while. In the quiet of her temporary room, she sat by the window and let the events of the day wash over her. The journey ahead was dangerous and uncertain, but she knew that every step, every moment of vulnerability, was a part of her transformation. The descent into the darkness of corporate betrayal and personal loss had become a journey of discovery, a discovery of her own inner strength and the unbreakable ties to her father's legacy. In the soft silence of early morning, with the first rays of light beginning to push back the night, Imani made a final vow to herself. "I will find the truth," she murmured, her eyes reflecting both the weariness of the past and the fierce hope for the future. "I will not let fear or betrayal define me. I will rise above this for him and for all of us who believe in a better tomorrow." Thus, as the dawn broke over the city, Imani stepped forward into a new chapter of her life, a chapter filled with uncertainty, danger, and the promise of redemption. With her allies by her side, she was ready to face the hidden forces that had once sought to silence her, determined to let the light of truth shine through the darkest of secrets. Every whispered conversation, every hidden document, and every heartfelt promise made in that safe house had transformed Imani. No longer was she just the daughter of a legacy. She was now the keeper of its truth, the guardian of its honor. And as she embraced the rising sun, Imani knew that the journey ahead, with all its twists and turns, would be the crucible in which her destiny was forged. In that moment of clarity, Imani felt a profound connection to the legacy of her father, a legacy that was not tarnished by the shadows of betrayal, but made all the more luminous by the strength of her resolve. The descent into this labyrinth of corruption had forced her to confront not only the external evils that threatened to destroy everything she cherished, but also the inner demons of doubt and despair. And in doing so, she discovered a wellspring of courage that would guide her every step. With the day unfolding before her and the weight of hidden truths pressing upon her, Imani stepped into the uncertain light of a new morning. Each step was a testament to her determination, each breath a silent pledge to reclaim the honor that had been stolen. The journey had only just begun, but already she could feel the transformative power of her struggle, an alchemy of pain and purpose that promised to reshape not only her own destiny, but the future of a legacy worth fighting for. Imani sat alone in the quiet of the safe house long after the others had gone to rest. The soft hum of the city outside her window was a stark contrast to the storm of thoughts swirling inside her. Earlier that night, with Lucia and Marcus by her side, she had begun to piece together the tangled web of secrets and betrayals hidden in the documents. But now, as she reread the files and stared at the flash drive Aaron had given her, an uneasy feeling began to grow, a sense that something was not as it seemed. She remembered the calm assurance in Aaron's eyes as he had spoken about exposing the corruption, his voice steady and his manner sincere. That memory now felt like a distant echo, tainted by a gnawing suspicion that had slowly crept up on her. Unable to shake it, Imani took a deep breath and decided she needed to review the flash drive once again, alone and undisturbed. Sitting at a small desk under a dim lamp, Imani inserted the flash drive into her laptop. The screen lit up, displaying a folder labeled Documents. Her heart pounded as she clicked through the files, each one filled with emails, scanned receipts, and digital memos. At first, everything seemed to reinforce the dark picture of corruption she had already begun to understand. But as she delved deeper, she discovered a subfolder hidden behind layers of encryption. A single file inside was marked with a date she recognized, the same night she had met with Aaron. Curiosity and dread mingled in her chest as she double-clicked the file. The document opened to reveal a series of email exchanges. At first glance, they appeared to be routine messages about shifting funds and secret meetings. But as she read further, a chilling truth began to emerge. The emails were written in a tone that was casual yet calculated, and one name kept appearing repeatedly in the signature lines: A. Carter. Imani's hands trembled. The signature was identical to the one Aaron had used on other documents he had given her. The messages detailed meetings with high-level executives from the company, a group of people who were now the very architects of the betrayal she was fighting against. In one email, Aaron had written, "The plan proceeds as scheduled. Ensure the information is available for future reference. We cannot afford any loose ends." Another email read, "I confirm that all actions taken last week were in line with our objectives. Trust is secondary when the future is at stake." A cold wave of disbelief washed over her. Aaron, the man who had appeared so earnest and helpful, was not just a concerned insider offering aid. He was actively involved in the very conspiracy he had pretended to oppose. Each sentence of those emails was like a blow, striking at the foundation of trust she had begun to build in him. The realization was painful and immediate. He had been using her, guiding her into a trap of secrets while he worked to hide his true allegiance. As she scrolled through the file, more evidence emerged. In one exchange, Aaron casually mentioned arranging the perfect diversion during the flight incident. He described the attack on her not as a random act of cruelty, but as a necessary step to silence potential threats to the network he was part of. The revelation made her stomach churn with a mix of anger and sorrow. How could someone she had begun to trust have played such a dangerous game? Imani closed the document and stared at the screen, her mind reeling with betrayal. For hours, she sat there in silence, replaying every conversation with Aaron, every reassuring smile. The flash drive lay open on her desk like a silent confession of his true nature. The The documents revealed that Aaron had been sending secret messages to the conspirators even before the attack. His calm, measured words now seemed like a mask to hide a dark ambition. Unable to contain the rising emotion, Imani's eyes filled with tears. She whispered to herself, "How could I have been so blind?" The sense of disillusionment was overwhelming. The safe haven she had believed she found in his guidance was now a trap. Everything she had worked for, the quest for truth, the hope of reclaiming her father's legacy, had been manipulated by someone she thought was an ally. The betrayal cut deep. Aaron had not only deceived her, but had used her vulnerability to further the very corruption she was trying to expose. Her heart felt heavy with the weight of this new truth. In that moment, the documents on the flash drive transformed from tools of liberation into instruments of betrayal. The conspiracy was far more insidious than she had imagined, and the people behind it were willing to sacrifice even those who seemed to fight the good fight. Imani's mind raced with questions. Had Aaron ever really cared about her father's legacy, or was he merely a pawn in a larger game? Every detail of their interactions now took on a sinister hue. She recalled the warmth in his voice when he had comforted her after the attack, the way he had guided her through the maze of documents with apparent concern. Now, all that remained was a cold calculation. He had been orchestrating her moves, feeding her just enough information to gain her trust, only to lead her into a web of deceit. As the shock began to ebb, a new resolve formed within her. The discovery of Aaron's duplicity would not break her spirit. It would strengthen her determination to uncover the full extent of the betrayal. Yet, the hurt was deep. She thought of the conversations with Lucia and Marcus, and a sinking feeling of isolation set in. How many of the people she had trusted were not what they seemed? The revelation forced her to question every relationship and every alliance she had formed since embarking on this dangerous journey. Her mind wandered back to the comforting words of Lucia, who had once assured her that they were in this fight together. Now, doubts crept in. Was Lucia truly on her side, or was she complicit in Aaron's plans? The thought was unbearable, yet the evidence before her was undeniable when it came to Aaron. For a moment, Imani's eyes closed as she recalled the memory of her father's gentle smile, a smile that had always inspired her to believe in goodness and honor. That memory was now juxtaposed with the harsh reality of betrayal. How could a man she looked up to, who had built a legacy on trust and integrity, have allowed such treachery to flourish around him? The internal struggle was intense. On one hand, the documents painted Aaron as a willing participant in a system of corruption. On the other, they threatened to unravel the very ideals that had driven her to seek the truth in the first place. The betrayal was personal. It was not just a political or corporate maneuver. It was a violation of the intimate trust she had placed in him. The painful irony was that the one person who had offered guidance and support had become a symbol of everything she despised, a traitor who used her pain for his own gain. Her hands gripped the edge of the desk as she tried to steady herself. "I cannot let this destroy what I believe in," she muttered softly. The shock and sorrow mingled with a fierce determination. If Aaron was willing to betray her trust so completely, then the conspiracy was even more dangerous than she had thought. It was clear that the corruption was not just a matter of money and power. It was personal, and it ran deep within the hearts of those she had once considered allies. Imani knew she had to confront the situation, but she also understood the risks. Confronting Aaron directly might lead to further manipulation or even put her in harm's way. Instead, she resolved to document everything meticulously. She copied every file from the flash drive, saving them to her secure account. Each piece of evidence was a testament to the deception that had infiltrated her quest for justice. With trembling fingers, she organized files into folders labeled Proof and Aaron's emails. Each new file was a nail in the coffin of the trust she had placed in him. The room was silent except for the soft clicking of keys as Imani worked. Outside, the city continued its steady rhythm, indifferent to the personal betrayal unfolding in a small, dim room. The quiet was oppressive, filled with the weight of truth and the sting of deceit. As she saved the final file, she paused to stare at the screen, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and resolve. "I will expose every lie," she vowed quietly. "I will not let your betrayal silence the truth." In that moment, the safe house transformed from a haven of hope into a battleground of broken trust. The revelation that Aaron had deceived her shattered the fragile cocoon of support she had built around herself. Every memory of his reassuring words now felt like a carefully constructed lie designed to mislead her. The betrayal was a wound that cut deep, but it also ignited a determination to fight back with even greater ferocity. Imani leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes as she struggled to regain her composure. The taste of betrayal was bitter on her tongue, and the shock of it had left her feeling numb for a few long minutes. Slowly, she began to piece together the magnitude of what had just been revealed. Aaron's involvement meant that the conspiracy was not only more extensive, but also more personal than she had ever imagined. It was as if the very foundation of her mission had been built on lies, and now those lies were coming to light. She thought of the countless hours spent poring over documents with Lucia and Marcus, each new discovery a step toward exposing the corruption. Now, that journey had taken an unexpected turn, a turn marked by deception from someone she had welcomed as a trusted guide. The emotional intensity of the moment overwhelmed her. Tears welled in her eyes as she questioned how she could have been so vulnerable. "How could I have trusted you?" she whispered to the empty room, addressing the ghost of Aaron's false promises. For a long while, she sat in silence, the pain of the betrayal mingling with a resolute anger. The documents before her were irrefutable evidence of his double life, and she knew that this discovery would change everything. The conspiracy, once an abstract network of corruption, was now laid bare before her, and the betrayal cut into her heart like a sharp blade. Slowly, Imani wiped away her tears and steadied her breath. The shock was beginning to transform into determination. If Aaron was part of the enemy, then every step forward had to be taken with even greater caution. She could no longer afford to trust blindly. Every ally, every contact, would now have to be scrutinized under the harsh light of this new truth. The betrayal had shifted her understanding of the world around her, turning friends into potential foes and leaving her questioning the loyalty of everyone in her inner circle. Even as the sting of betrayal burned inside her, Imani realized that this revelation, as painful as it was, could also be a turning point. The corruption she sought to expose had grown even more dangerous with Aaron's involvement. Now, more than ever, she needed to rely on her own strength and the few allies she could trust. With shaking hands, she began drafting a new plan. Her strategy would have to account for the treachery that had infiltrated her ranks. She resolved to confront the conspiracy head-on, armed with the evidence of Aaron's deceit and the knowledge that the path to justice would be fraught with even greater peril. Her mind turned to Lucia. She recalled the earnest look in Lucia's eyes when they had discussed the documents, and she wondered if Lucia too might have secrets. But for now, the evidence against Aaron was undeniable, and it fueled her determination to move forward with a clear focus. She would need to protect herself from further betrayal and build a network of trusted allies who shared her commitment to exposing the truth. Imani stood up from her desk and walked over to the window, looking out at the sleeping city. The night was quiet, almost mournful, as if the world itself grieved the loss of trust and innocence. In that stillness, she made a promise to herself. "I will not let this betrayal define me," she said softly, her voice echoing in the empty room. "I will let it be the spark that fuels my fight for the truth. I will expose every lie, no matter how deep it goes." The revelation had shaken her to her core, but it also lit a fire within her. The path ahead was more treacherous than she had ever imagined, but with the evidence of Aaron's betrayal safely stored on her computer, she knew that she now had the power to change the course of events. The once comforting words of Aaron had been twisted into instruments of deceit, but they would no longer hold sway over her heart. As dawn slowly began to break outside, casting a pale light over the horizon, Imani sat back down and began to write. She documented every detail of her discovery, every email, and every note that exposed the dark truth. The act of writing was cathartic, a way to reclaim control over her narrative and transform her pain into a weapon against those who sought to silence the truth. With each word she typed, she felt a part of herself healing, even as the wound of betrayal remained raw. In that quiet, early morning light, Imani realized that while the betrayal had shattered her trust in one person, it had also clarified her purpose. The fight for justice was now more personal than ever. She would honor her father's legacy not by clinging to a false sense of loyalty, but by forging her own path, a path that demanded honesty, resilience, and unwavering courage. The discovery of Aaron's true intentions marked a turning point in her journey. The sense of betrayal, once a heavy weight, was now a catalyst for action. Imani closed her laptop and looked at the documents one last time. The evidence of deception was undeniable, and while the emotional pain was deep, it had also given her a clearer vision of the road ahead. She would proceed with caution, but she would not falter. The truth had been hidden for too long, and now it was time to let it shine, no matter how dark the forces behind it might be. With a renewed determination, Imani gathered the printed copies of the critical files and secured them in a folder. She knew that sharing this evidence with her trusted allies would be the next step, but she also understood that trust would now be earned anew, one careful decision at a time. The betrayal by Aaron had altered everything, but it had not broken her. Instead, it steeled her resolve to fight against the corruption that had infiltrated her world. Standing by the window as the first rays of sunlight painted the sky with soft hues of pink and gold, Imani took a deep breath. She felt the weight of the night's revelations on her shoulders, yet she also felt a strange sense of liberation. The painful truth was out, and there was no turning back. Now every step she took would be measured, every alliance scrutinized, but she would move forward with the strength that came from knowing exactly what she was up against. In that silent, hopeful moment, Imani made a final promise to herself. "I will not be a victim of betrayal," she whispered. "I will use this pain to light the way for justice and truth. I owe it to my father, to myself, and to everyone who has been wronged." The betrayal had cut deep, and the road ahead would be perilous. Yet, as the morning light filled the room, Imani felt an unwavering determination rising within her. Aaron's treachery had revealed the true nature of the enemy she faced, a corrupt network that would stop at nothing to preserve its power. And now, armed with the evidence of his deceit and the resolve to honor her father's legacy, she was ready to expose every hidden lie. With a final, steadying breath, Imani closed her eyes and prepared herself for the next chapter in her struggle, a chapter defined by both heartbreak and hope, where every betrayal would serve as a reminder of the strength needed to fight for what was right. Imani had barely found a moment's peace after the devastating revelation about Aaron when the world around her began to spiral out of control. The night after her discovery, sleep eluded her. Every minute was filled with doubts, and the evidence of betrayal burned in her mind like a harsh beacon. In the quiet hours before dawn, she sat at a small table in the safe house, the scattered documents and digital files spread out before her. Her heart pounded as she tried to organize her thoughts, and the weight of each new piece of evidence pressed heavily on her spirit. She thought about Aaron's carefully worded emails and the way his assurances had masked his true loyalties. That betrayal, so unexpected and painful, had shaken the foundation of everything she believed. Yet, even as she steeled herself against the shock, a nagging sensation told her that this was only the beginning. The very air in the room felt charged, as if unseen forces were already drawing her into a deeper, more dangerous spiral. The first sign that the situation was escalating came in the form of an unexpected message on her secure phone. The text, arriving in the dead silence of the early morning, read simply, "Meet me at the old warehouse. Urgent." The sender was unknown, but the message carried an air of authority that made Imani's pulse quicken. Her mind raced with questions. Who could be reaching out at such a critical moment? Was this another lead, or a trap set by the conspirators. With little time to ponder, she knew she had to act swiftly. Leaving the safe house with only a small bag and her phone, Imani made her way through dark, deserted streets. The city, usually so familiar, now seemed a labyrinth of shadows and hidden threats. Every step she took was accompanied by a sense of foreboding, as if the very ground beneath her feet was betraying her. The cold night air bit at her skin, and she pulled her jacket tighter around her, her mind focused on the message and the potential answers it might bring. When she arrived at the warehouse, its imposing silhouette loomed against the faint glow of streetlights. The building, long abandoned and now a relic of a forgotten era, exuded an eerie sense of neglect. Imani hesitated at the entrance, her heart pounding as she surveyed the area for signs of danger. Then, she pushed the heavy door open and stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit by shafts of moonlight piercing through broken windows. Dust danced in the air, and the silence was heavy, almost suffocating. As she moved deeper into the vast space, she heard footsteps echoing softly behind her. Instantly on guard, Imani turned, her eyes straining in the darkness. Out of the shadows emerged a figure, tall, cloaked, and moving with a deliberate grace. Imani, the figure said in a low, measured tone. It was a man with a face partially hidden beneath a hood, but his voice carried familiarity that made her pause. "I've been waiting for you." Her heart skipped a beat. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling yet determined. "What do you want?" The stranger stepped closer, and as the light caught his features, Imani recognized him. It was Daniel, a former associate of her father, someone she had only heard about in hushed, reverent tones. Daniel had once been a trusted friend of her father, known for his unwavering commitment to truth and justice. Yet now, his eyes held a secret burden, and his expression was grim. "I'm here to warn you," Daniel said softly, "and to offer help if you're willing to accept it." He paused, his gaze locking with hers. "There is another layer to all of this, a deeper deception that you have yet to uncover." Before Imani could press for details, a sudden noise from behind startled them both. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, echoed through the cavernous space. Daniel's eyes narrowed as he whispered, "We're not alone." In that moment, Imani realized that her every move was being watched, and that the danger was far closer than she had imagined. They ducked behind a stack of old crates as a group of shadowy figures entered the warehouse. The intruders moved with a confidence that suggested they were not random trespassers, but men sent with a purpose. Imani's mind raced. Had her meeting here been a trap? And if so, who was orchestrating it? Her thoughts churned with the possibility that the betrayal might extend beyond Aaron and into the very circle she had thought she could trust. As the figures passed by, Daniel leaned in and whispered, "These men are part of the organization that has been pulling the strings behind the scenes. They will stop at nothing to silence anyone who gets too close to the truth." His words sent a shiver down her spine. The conspirators were not only willing to betray their own, but to use violence against those who threatened their power. Once the intruders had moved on, Daniel led Imani to a secluded corner of the warehouse. There, in the dim light, he unfolded a battered notebook and spread out a series of documents. "I received these last night," he said. "They are evidence of a far-reaching scheme that goes back years, decades even. Your father was not the only one betrayed. Many who stood for honesty have been sacrificed in this game of power." Imani's hands shook as she took the documents. The pages contained detailed financial records, coded messages, and the names of individuals who were deeply entrenched in the company's management. Among the names was one that made her blood run cold, a name she had never expected to see, one associated with her family's closest allies. It was the name of her trusted advisor, Lucia. For a long moment, Imani sat in stunned silence. The documents, printed on heavy paper and marked with intricate notations, suggested that Lucia had been receiving secret payments and had been in regular contact with high-ranking executives involved in the corruption. The realization was like a knife twisting in her heart. Lucia, who had been her confidant and steadfast support, might have been working for the enemy all along. Daniel watched her with solemn eyes. "I'm sorry you have to learn this way," he said gently, "but sometimes the truth is hidden in the places we least expect it. You must decide what to do with this knowledge. It complicates everything, doesn't it?" Imani's mind swirled with a tumult of emotions. Anger, betrayal, and profound sadness warred within her. She remembered the long nights spent with Lucia, the shared hopes of restoring her father's legacy, and the assurances that they were fighting for a just cause. Now, everything was shrouded in doubt. How could the one person she had relied on so deeply be part of this intricate web of deceit? Her internal struggle was mirrored by the external danger that still lurked in the shadows of the warehouse. Every moment felt like a countdown, each second drawing her closer to an uncertain fate. Daniel's revelation about Lucia added a layer of complexity to her already overwhelming choices. She now had to question not only the conspiracies behind the company's corruption, but also the loyalty of those closest to her. After a tense silence, Imani's voice broke through, raw and trembling with emotion. "I need time to think," she said, her eyes fixed on the documents. "I don't know what to believe anymore. Everything I trusted, my father, my friends, even my own instincts, they all feel tainted now." Daniel nodded understandingly. "Take all the time you need, Imani," he replied softly. "But remember, in times like these, hesitation can be as dangerous as action. The longer you wait, the more the enemy tightens its grip. You must decide soon which path you will take." With Daniel's words echoing in her mind, Imani left the warehouse and returned to the safe house. The drive back was a blur of thoughts and emotions. The city lights, usually a source of comfort, now seemed to mock her, each flicker a reminder of the darkness that lay hidden beneath the surface of her world. Back in the safe house, Imani locked herself in her room. She spread out the documents on her desk and began to read them over again, searching for any sign that could explain the betrayal. The numbers, the coded messages, and the dates all pointed to a long-standing network of corruption that had infiltrated every level of the company. But it was Lucia's name that haunted her most, a betrayal that cut deeper because it came from within her own inner circle. In the solitude of her room, Imani's internal conflict escalated. Every memory of laughter, every shared secret with Lucia, now seemed like a carefully constructed facade. The woman who had promised to stand by her side had been wearing a mask, and the revelation of that deception left Imani feeling more isolated than ever. She struggled with the urge to confront Lucia immediately, to demand answers and an explanation for the secret communications. Yet, a part of her feared that such a confrontation would only plunge her deeper into the chaos of deceit. As dawn broke again, painting the sky with pale hues of gray and blue, Imani resolved to take action. She called Marcus, the quiet man who had helped her piece together some of the earlier clues. Marcus's voice was gentle over the phone, but it carried a tone of urgency. "Imani, I heard what happened," he said softly. "I'm so sorry, but you need to be careful. If Lucia is involved, that changes everything. You must be cautious about who you trust now." Her heart ached at his words. "I don't know what to do, Marcus," she replied, her voice heavy with despair and determination. "Every step I take, I feel like I'm sinking deeper into a spiral of betrayal. I thought I had found allies in this fight, but now I'm not sure who to believe." Marcus paused before speaking again. "I suggest you confront Lucia, but not alone. Gather more evidence. Find someone who can help you verify these documents without exposing yourself too much. You must be strategic. This isn't just about exposing corruption anymore. It's about surviving it." That conversation marked the beginning of a perilous new phase. Imani decided to reach out to Lucia, arranging a meeting under the guise of needing further clarification about some financial reports. The meeting was set in a quiet cafe, a neutral ground away from the prying eyes of the safe house. As she entered the cafe, Imani's stomach churned with anxiety. The warm, inviting ambience of the place did little to soothe her turbulent thoughts. Lucia was already seated at a corner table, her face calm as she reviewed a set of documents. When Imani approached, the initial smiles and friendly greetings quickly gave way to an undercurrent of tension. They exchanged pleasantries, but Imani could not shake the feeling that every word from Lucia was laden with hidden meanings. "Lucia," Imani began slowly, "I've been reviewing some documents, and there are a few discrepancies I can't ignore. I need your help to understand them." Her voice was steady, yet inside, her heart raced with a mix of hope and trepidation. Lucia's eyes flickered for a moment, betraying a hint of unease, but she quickly composed herself. "Of course, Imani," she said smoothly. "I'm more than willing to help. Let's look at them together." As they spread the papers out on the table, Imani searched Lucia's face for any sign of guilt or evasion. The conversation that followed was a delicate dance of words. Lucia explained away the irregularities with technical jargon and vague references to corporate restructuring and adjustments in the accounting process. But Imani noticed small details, the way Lucia's eyes would dart away when certain names were mentioned, the slight hesitation before she answered questions about specific transactions. The more they talked, the more Imani felt that something was off. Finally, unable to contain her mounting suspicion, Imani leaned forward. "Lucia, I have to ask you directly, have you ever been in contact with the executives who are behind these irregularities? I've found evidence that suggests you might be involved." Her voice was barely a whisper, yet it carried all the pain of betrayal. For a long, agonizing moment, Lucia said nothing. Then, slowly, her expression shifted. "Imani, you must understand, sometimes, to protect what we hold dear, we must make compromises that the world may never fully accept." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and the air between them grew thick with unspoken truths. "I never intended to hurt you. I did what I thought was necessary to safeguard your father's legacy." The confession, delivered in a hushed tone, was not a full admission, but it was enough to shatter what remained of Imani's trust. In that moment, the spiral of betrayal deepened further. Imani felt as if the ground had been pulled from beneath her, and the pain of betrayal, first by Aaron and now by Lucia, wrought a deep internal conflict. How could she continue to fight for a legacy built on such treachery? Tears welled in Imani's eyes, and her voice trembled as she said, "If this is true, then everything I believed in is a lie. I trusted you with my life, and now I don't know who I can trust anymore." The words, heavy with sorrow and disbelief, echoed in the quiet cafe, drawing curious glances from nearby patrons. Lucia reached out, her hand trembling as she tried to bridge the chasm between them. "Imani, please understand. I did it to protect you. I thought I could manage it all without you knowing. I never wanted you to feel betrayed." But the damage was done. The delicate trust between them lay in ruins, and Imani felt as if her heart had been shattered into 1,000 pieces. Outside the cafe, the world continued its relentless pace, indifferent to the personal storm raging within Imani. The spiral of deception and betrayal had escalated her conflicts to a point where every choice seemed fraught with danger. The external threats, Daniel's warnings, the presence of armed men in the warehouse, and the looming possibility of more conspirators closing in, merged with her internal anguish, creating a maelstrom of uncertainty. In the days that followed, Imani found herself caught between the desire for vengeance and the desperate need for truth. Every meeting, every conversation, was tinged with mistrust. Marcus tried to help her sift through the evidence, while Daniel urged her to take decisive action before the conspirators silenced her permanently. Yet, with Lucia's betrayal now revealed, even those she once relied on felt suspect. Late one evening, as rain battered the windows of her safe house, Imani sat alone with her thoughts. The documents, the emails, the broken promises, they all converged into a painful reminder that the fight for her father's legacy had become far more complex than she had ever imagined. The spiral of deceit was unyielding, and with every step she took, she found herself sinking deeper into a world where nothing was as it seemed. Her mind was a battlefield of conflicting emotions. She was filled with anger at Aaron's calculated betrayal, despair over Lucia's hidden complicity, and a deep-seated fear that she might lose herself in this relentless pursuit of justice. Yet, amid the turmoil, a spark of determination remained. Imani knew that she could not allow herself to be consumed by betrayal. The truth, however painful, had to be uncovered, even if it meant facing the darkest parts of the conspiracy and the people she once loved. One cold night, after a particularly restless day of confronting her inner demons, Imani made a decision. She would confront the remaining members of her inner circle, demanding transparency and loyalty. With her secure phone in hand, she arranged a meeting with Marcus and Daniel at a discreet location, a rundown cafe on the outskirts of the city. The meeting was tense from the start, as each of them carried the scars of recent betrayals. "I can't believe how far this has gone," Imani said, her voice low and resolute as she stared at the flickering candle on the table. "Every time I think I've uncovered the truth, I find another lie. I don't know who to trust anymore." Marcus's face was etched with worry. "I know, Imani. This is more than just corporate corruption now. It's personal. The people behind this are willing to sacrifice anyone to keep their secrets. We have to be very careful." Daniel leaned forward, his eyes hard. "We must decide our next move quickly. The spiral is accelerating, and every day we delay more lives." The conversation stretched long into the night, with each of them laying out their fears, suspicions, and the evidence they had gathered. Imani felt the crushing weight of every betrayal, yet also a small measure of resolve. The spiral of deception was now undeniable, and with it came the painful realization that her choices would determine not only her own fate, but that of the legacy she had sworn to protect. As the meeting ended, and the cold night reclaimed the empty streets, Imani walked home alone. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement slick and glistening under the streetlights. Every reflection in the puddles seemed to mock her, images of a woman who had once believed in honor and truth, now fractured by betrayal. But despite the overwhelming darkness, Imani knew that she could not afford to surrender to despair. The path ahead was treacherous, but she resolved to fight back, even if it meant risking everything she held dear. In the solitude of her room that night, Imani opened her journal, a place where she had once recorded her dreams and hopes. Now, the pages were filled with painful confessions and the raw emotions of betrayal. With trembling fingers, she began to write about the spiral that had overtaken her life, the deceit, the shifting alliances, and the internal conflicts that left her questioning every step she took. The act of writing was both cathartic and a declaration of war against those who had shattered her trust. "I feel lost in a spiral of lies," she wrote, her handwriting shaky yet determined. "Every revelation, every betrayal, pushes me further into a maze where even my closest allies may be enemies. But I will not be defeated by this darkness. I will fight, and I will uncover the truth, no matter how painful it may be." That night, as the city slumbered, Imani's resolve grew stronger. The spiral of deception and betrayal had forced her to confront the harsh realities of her world, and though it had left her wounded, it had also forged an unbreakable determination to reclaim her destiny. With every piece of evidence, every shattered trust, she was piecing together the puzzle of a conspiracy that was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The next day, Imani set out with a renewed sense of purpose. She arranged a series of discreet meetings with the few remaining trusted contacts, determined to verify every shred of evidence against the conspirators. Each meeting was fraught with tension, and every whispered conversation carried the risk of exposure. The external threats grew more urgent, and the internal conflicts intensified as Imani struggled to decide who could be counted on and who must be left behind. One evening, as she waited in a quiet park for a confidential message, Imani's phone buzzed with an encrypted alert. It was from an unknown source, urging her to meet at a secluded location by the river. The message was terse and left little room for doubt. A new layer of urgency had been added to the already perilous spiral. With no alternative, Imani ventured out into the cool night, her mind alert to every sound and movement. At the riverbank, Shrouded in darkness and illuminated only by the moon's pale light, Imani encountered a figure emerging from the mist. It was a woman, her face partly hidden by a hood, who introduced herself only as Raven. The woman's voice was low and urgent as she spoke. "I have information that will change everything. There are betrayals yet to be revealed, and you must be prepared for what comes next." In that moment, Imani realized that the spiral was far from over. The layers of deception were deepening, and the choices before her were becoming ever more complex and dangerous. Standing by the flowing river, Imani felt the pull of conflicting emotions, the desire to trust, and the need to guard her heart against further betrayal. As Raven faded back into the night after delivering her cryptic message, Imani understood that every step she took from now on would be a delicate balancing act between hope and despair, between loyalty and the bitter taste of treachery. In the days that followed, Imani's life became a whirlwind of secret meetings, coded messages, and hushed conversations in dimly lit rooms. The spiral of conflict, both external and internal, was accelerating, and each new revelation forced her to make choices that threatened to tear her apart. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, she pressed forward. The truth was within reach, and she vowed to expose every hidden lie, no matter how deeply it was buried. Every decision became a gamble. Could she trust the allies who claimed to stand by her, or were they also entangled in the web of deceit? The fear of another betrayal haunted her every step, and the burden of uncovering the truth weighed heavily on her soul. But in that crucible of conflict and uncertainty, Imani's determination burned brighter than ever. The spiral, with all its pain and chaos, had become the crucible in which her resolve was forged. Standing at the crossroads of loyalty and betrayal, Imani realized that the only way to break free from a spiral was to confront the deepest layers of deception, even if it meant facing the ones she once loved. With her heart heavy yet resolute, she prepared herself for the coming storm. The path ahead was perilous, filled with shadowy figures, uncertain alliances, and the ever-present threat of more betrayal. But Imani knew one thing for certain: she would not let the spiral of lies define her. Instead, she would rise, armed with the truth and guided by the memory of the legacy she was determined to honor. And so, as the relentless wheel of deception turned ever faster, Imani stepped forward into the darkness with unwavering resolve. Every moment, every heartbeat, was a testament to her fight against the corruption that had infiltrated her world. Though the spiral of conflict and betrayal threatened to overwhelm her, she clung to the hope that one day the truth would shine through the murk of deceit, and that she, in exposing every hidden lie, could finally reclaim her destiny. In that silent, determined moment, Imani made a final promise to herself. No matter how treacherous the path, no matter how many times she was forced to question the loyalty of those around her, she would keep moving forward. The spiral of betrayal had taken much from her, but it would never take away her resolve to fight for what was right. And with that promise echoing in her heart, Imani embraced the uncertainty of the future, ready to face whatever new deceptions and dangers lay ahead. Imani's footsteps echoed in the cavernous marble hall as she strode toward the imposing glass doors of the corporate headquarters. Every step reverberated with the weight of years of hidden truths and shattered trust. The building, a monument to power and ambition, loomed in the early morning light, its reflective facade a mirror for all the lies it had long concealed. Today, that facade was destined to crack open and reveal every buried secret. Inside, the air was cool and tense. The lobby was quiet, almost eerily so, unlike the usual bustle of daily business. As Imani passed under the soaring ceilings and through corridors lined with polished surfaces and muted colors, she recalled the painful journey that had led her here. The betrayal by Aaron, the revelation of Lucia's double dealings, and the relentless spiral of deception that had threatened to swallow her whole. Now, every step carried her closer to a confrontation that promised both resolution and sorrow. Imani reached a heavy door marked Executive Boardroom. With a deep breath, she pushed it open. The room was bathed in soft, ambient light from a large window overlooking the city. A long, sleek table dominated the center, and seated around it were the very figures who had orchestrated the corruption she had been fighting against for so long. Among them sat Mr. Langford, the once revered chairman whose stern face now betrayed hints of anxiety, and other executives whose eyes flickered with a mixture of defiance and dread. A hush fell over the room as Imani entered. Every eye turned toward her. For a moment, silence reigned, a silence heavy with anticipation, regret, and the promise of retribution. Imani's heart pounded like a drum in her ears as she stepped forward, clutching in her hand a thick folder brimming with damning documents and digital files. The evidence of betrayal was laid bare before her: emails, financial records, and secret memos that painted a portrait of systemic deceit. "Good morning," Imani said, her voice trembling yet resolute. "I'm here to set the record straight." Her tone was calm, but every word carried the weight of years of pain and the fierce determination of a daughter defending her father's legacy. Mr. Langford cleared his throat, his voice shaky, as he replied, "Miss Adeyemi, we were not expecting you at this hour." His polite smile was thin and brittle. "I'm sure you understand that there are procedures to follow." Imani's eyes narrowed. Procedures? Procedures that allowed a system built on lies to thrive. "I've gathered all the evidence, and today I will reveal every truth that has been hidden in the shadows of your boardroom." Her voice grew louder, stronger, as she spread the folder open on the table. "This is proof of financial irregularities, secret communications, and, most devastating of all, the betrayals by those I trusted." A murmur ran through the assembled executives, and Mr. Langford's face turned ashen. One of the younger board members shifted uncomfortably, while others exchanged uneasy glances. The documents glowed under the soft light, their printed words standing as silent witnesses to corruption. Imani continued, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. "I trusted you all to uphold the legacy my father built, a legacy of integrity, transparency, and honor. But instead, I have discovered that this company has been run by a cabal of deceit. Aaron, whose name I once believed represented truth, has been in direct communication with you all, orchestrating schemes under the guise of loyalty." She paused, her eyes sweeping the room. "And Lucia, my friend, my confidant, you were complicit in these treacheries, safeguarding your own interests at the expense of everything we once believed in." A sharp gasp cut through the silence. Lucia's eyes, wide with shock and remorse, met Imani's piercing gaze. For a long moment, neither spoke. The betrayal in those eyes was unmistakable, a silent confession of guilt, and the crushing burden of secrets kept too long. Mr. Langford, attempting to regain control of the situation, interjected in a measured tone, "Miss Adeyemi, these accusations are serious. We are prepared to review any evidence you provide." His words, though careful, lacked conviction. Imani knew that the time for polite discussion had long passed. Reaching into her folder, she extracted a series of printed emails and spread them out before the board. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the correspondence. "Here is an email sent by Aaron, signed A. Carter, detailing a perfect diversion during the incident on your flight, a diversion meant to ensure that certain truths would remain buried. And here," she added, sliding another document across the table, "is evidence that Lucia was in regular contact with high-level executives responsible for the company's financial misdeeds." The room fell into a deeper silence as the weight of the evidence sank in. The light from the window painted the faces of the conspirators in harsh relief, shadows revealing fear, regret, and a dawning realization that their carefully constructed web of lies was unraveling. "I have nothing left to hide," Imani declared. "I stand before you not just as a victim of betrayal, but as the rightful heir to my father's legacy. I demand that you answer for every secret, every unethical transaction, and every act of treachery that has tainted this company. Today, all truths will be revealed, and there will be no escape from accountability." Her voice wavered momentarily, then steadied with a fierce intensity. I ask you, where is the honor my father fought so hard to instill? Where is the justice for those who believed in this company's integrity? The questions hung in the air, each one a challenge to the very foundation of the corruption before them. A tense murmur spread among the executives as one by one they began to speak. One man, his voice barely audible, said, "I did not realize the extent of what was happening." Another, more defiant, sneered, "You think you can come in here and change everything? It's too late for that." But Imani's unwavering gaze and the stark clarity of the evidence made it impossible to deny the truth. Outside the boardroom, in a nearby hallway, a security officer glanced at his monitor and frowned as he noticed the commotion. He quickly walked toward the room, but the door had already been locked from the inside by someone who understood that this was a battle that could not be interrupted. Inside, the atmosphere grew increasingly electric. Lucia's voice, when it came, was soft and tremulous. "Imani, please. I did it to protect you. I thought if I controlled the flow of information, I could safeguard your future." Her eyes brimmed with tears, and the remorse was palpable. "I never intended for it to come to this." Imani's heart broke anew at the sound of Lucia's confession, but the betrayal was too deep, the evidence too overwhelming. "Protect me," she echoed bitterly. "How can protecting me involve deceiving me, and in the process, corrupting the very ideals we once believed in? You took away my right to know the truth. You robbed me of my ability to honor my father's memory properly." Her words, laden with both anger and sorrow, reverberated in the quiet room. The board members shifted uncomfortably as they witnessed a daughter's raw pain confronting the treachery that had infiltrated her life. The air was thick with tension, every breath charged with the weight of unspoken regrets and the finality of shattered dreams. Mr. Langford, his face now etched with lines of defeat and despair, spoke in a low, resigned tone. "Miss Adeyemi, we have long operated in a system that demands difficult choices. Not all of us believed in the methods used, but we were bound by circumstances beyond our control." His attempt at justification fell flat against the backdrop of Imani's unwavering resolve. "Bound by circumstances," Imani repeated, her voice rising. "I was never bound by circumstances. I was bound by the promise of truth, the promise of honor. My father's legacy was built on the foundation of trust and transparency. And now, that foundation has been eroded by greed, deceit, and betrayal. I stand here, not to destroy, but to rebuild on the ashes of your corruption." For a long, agonizing moment, silence reigned once more. The only sound was the soft hum of the building's air conditioning and the distant murmur of the city outside. In that silence, each person in the room was forced to confront the enormity of their actions and the consequences that had led to this climactic juncture. As the tension reached its peak, one of the younger executives, his face pale with fear, spoke up. "Miss Adeyemi, what do you intend to do now?" His question, though timid, carried the weight of a final plea for redemption, a hope that maybe, just maybe, the truth could still save them. Imani's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she took a moment to collect herself. "I intend to do what is right," she said softly but firmly. "I will expose every hidden lie, every deception that has tainted this company, even if it means turning everything I once believed in upside down. I will not let the betrayal of a few undermine the legacy of my father or the hope of a future built on genuine integrity." Her words resonated with an almost palpable force, as if the very walls of the boardroom vibrated with the intensity of her conviction. In that moment, the full scope of the moral battle became clear. Not merely a fight against corporate corruption, but a struggle to reclaim the values of truth, honor, and justice from the clutches of deceit. Outside, as the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the glass, casting long, dramatic shadows on the polished floor, Imani felt a profound shift within herself. The confrontation had not only exposed the hidden truths of the conspiracy, but had also forced her to face the darkest parts of her own heart, the doubts, the betrayals, the pain of losing trust in those she loved. In the soft light of dawn, with the city awakening beyond the glass walls, Imani closed the folder slowly and looked around the room. The expressions of conspirators, etched with guilt, fear, and a dawning realization of the irreversible damage they had caused, spoke volumes. Even as Mr. Langford's voice quivered in a final attempt to justify their actions, Imani's heart remained unyielding. The legacy of her father demanded nothing less than complete truth and accountability. "I have learned," Imani said quietly, her voice echoing in the vast silence, "that truth is not merely the absence of lies. It is the courage to stand up when everything you hold dear is built on deception. I have seen betrayal in its most ruthless form, and yet I choose to believe that redemption is possible, not through revenge, but through a commitment to rebuild what was lost." Her words carried a note of moral reflection that softened the edges of the confrontation. In that final, fraught moment, Imani extended an olive branch, a call for those present to reconsider their paths and choose a future defined by integrity. "I do not wish to see more lives ruined by the endless pursuit of power. I wish to honor my father's memory by restoring honor and trust to this institution. Let this be the turning point. Let us rebuild together on a foundation of truth." In that moment of fragile clarity, Imani felt both the sting of heartbreak and the warmth of hope. The confrontation had stripped away the pretenses, leaving only raw emotion and the undeniable need for justice. It was a moment that demanded moral reckoning, a reckoning that would define the future of the company and, more importantly, the legacy of her father. With a final, steadying breath, Imani gathered the remaining documents and prepared to leave the boardroom. "I will not wait any longer," she declared softly, "for justice to be served. I will take this evidence and ensure that the truth is known to everyone, so that no one else suffers as we have." Her voice was firm, resolute, and it carried the promise of a new beginning. As she stepped out of the boardroom, the corridors bathed in the gentle light of dawn, Imani felt the overwhelming mix of sorrow, anger, and determination converge within her. The dramatic confrontation had ended, but the moral reflection was just beginning. In the silent spaces between the echoes of her footsteps, she pondered the cost of truth and the price of betrayal. She knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with danger, yet in that moment, with the first light of a new day illuminating the path, she embraced the challenge. Imani vowed to honor her father's memory by forging a future where integrity was paramount, where the lessons of betrayal would serve not as scars, but as guideposts toward redemption. Every step she took from that day forward would be measured, every decision informed by the bitter taste of deceit and the sweet promise of truth. And though the memories of this confrontation would forever haunt her, they would also fuel her relentless pursuit of a better tomorrow. In that quiet, transformative dawn, as the city awoke to a new day and Imani walked away from the boardroom, she carried with her a profound understanding. The greatest battles are fought not only in the corridors of power, but within the depths of one's own soul. And in that inner sanctum of determination and hope, she found the strength to rise above the darkness, ready to rebuild, to forgive where possible, and to never again allow the spiral of betrayal to define her destiny. Imani stood at the edge of a quiet park in the early morning light, the chill of dawn mingling with the lingering warmth of an inner fire that had grown throughout her long, tumultuous journey. The echoes of the boardroom confrontation and the painful betrayals she had suffered, Aaron's deceit, Lucia's secret collusion, and even the complicity of those once thought to be allies, had finally been exposed to the world. Yet in the aftermath of that dramatic day, as the news spread and the once untouchable pillars of the corporation began to crumble under the weight of public scrutiny and internal guilt, Imani found herself alone with the truth and the heavy burden of its consequences. For weeks, the fallout had been relentless. The corporate empire her father had built was in disarray, its leaders scrambling to explain away the evidence that Imani had so painstakingly gathered. Public trust in the company had eroded almost overnight, and government regulators had begun to intervene. Headlines spoke of corruption, betrayal, and a legacy that had been tarnished by greed. In the midst of this upheaval, Imani's resolve was tested every day. not only by the external battle for justice, but also by the internal struggle to reconcile the ideals of her father's vision with the bitter realities she had uncovered. Every morning, as she walked through the park along winding paths bordered by dew-kissed grass and ancient oak trees, Imani would pause to reflect on the journey that had led her here. The park, with its natural beauty and the steady rhythm of life, children playing, joggers passing by, the gentle rustling of leaves in the soft breeze, provided a stark contrast to the cold, calculated corridors of corporate power she had left behind. It was here, in the solitude of nature, that she allowed herself to breathe and to mourn for what had been lost, while also nurturing the seeds of a new beginning. Sitting on a weathered bench beneath a canopy of branches, Imani opened her worn leather journal, its pages now filled with not only her dreams and hopes from years past, but also the painful lessons learned from betrayal and loss. With each careful stroke of her pen, she recorded her thoughts, trying to untangle the moral complexities of her journey. "I set out to reclaim my father's legacy," she wrote, "but in doing so, I discovered that truth is a double-edged sword. It liberates, yet it wounds. It demands sacrifice, and sometimes it forces us to confront the parts of ourselves we wish were otherwise." Her handwriting, shaky at first, grew steadier as she poured out her reflections, a silent testament to the transformation that had taken root within her. In the weeks following the climactic confrontation, Imani had worked closely with a small group of trusted reformers. Among them were Marcus, whose quiet determination and methodical approach had helped piece together the final shards of evidence, and Daniel, whose once hidden loyalties now aligned fully with the cause of justice. Together, they initiated a series of reforms within the now discredited company. New leadership was installed, individuals who pledged to honor the principles of transparency and accountability that had once defined her father's vision. As the restructuring process took hold, Imani found herself frequently summoned to meetings to speak on behalf of the people who had suffered under the old regime and to help shape policies that would prevent such betrayals in the future. Despite the progress, every step forward was intermingled with lingering doubts. In quiet moments late at night, Imani wrestled with the moral implications of her actions. Had her relentless pursuit of the truth, which had exposed so much corruption, come at too high a price? The images of shattered friendships and broken trust haunted her. She recalled the moment when Lucia's tearful confession had torn her heart in two, a moment that had forced her to question whether the ends truly justified the means. "I never wanted to destroy what was sacred," she often reminded herself. "I only wanted to restore it." But in the process, she had seen how the quest for truth could turn even the strongest bonds to brittle fragments of memory. One crisp evening, after a particularly grueling day of negotiations and policy reviews, Imani took a solitary walk along the riverbank. The water flowed steadily beneath a starlit sky, its surface rippling with reflections of distant city lights, a quiet reminder that life continues even after the most violent storms. As she walked, the cool breeze whispered secrets of change and renewal, and the rhythmic sound of the current lulled her into a meditative state. Here, away from the harsh glare of public scrutiny and the relentless pace of corporate battles, she allowed herself to truly reflect on what it meant to carry the weight of truth. She thought back to the beginning of her journey, to the day she had been struck down on that flight, the moment when a single act of cruelty had shattered her sense of security and ignited a fire of rebellion within her. That act, so senseless and unjust, had been the catalyst that propelled her into a labyrinth of deception and betrayal. And yet, it had also awakened in her a profound understanding of the fragility and resilience of human spirit. In the wake of that pain, she had discovered allies in unexpected places and learned that even in a world rife with corruption, there remained the possibility of redemption. The moral reflection deepened as she recalled the many faces of betrayal she had encountered. Aaron's cold calculations had revealed how even those who appeared compassionate could be driven by self-interest. Lucia's secretive actions had shown that loyalty is not always as steadfast as it seems. And the complicity of the corporate leaders, who had long hidden behind layers of bureaucracy and silence, had underscored the harsh truth that power often comes at the expense of integrity. Yet, as painful as these truths were, they had also forced her to confront her own vulnerabilities. In the mirror of betrayal, she saw her own reflection, scarred, yet unyielding, wounded, yet determined to rise above the darkness. One particular night, as rain pelted softly against the window of her modest apartment, Imani sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by scattered documents and the soft glow of a single lamp. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to remember her father's gentle voice, a voice that had once filled her with hope and pride. Truth, he had told her, is the most powerful force we have. It may be hard to bear, but it is the light that guides us through our darkest times. Those words, spoken so long ago, resonated now more than ever. They were a reminder that even when the world seemed engulfed in deceit, the courage to seek and uphold the truth was a beacon that could never be extinguished. In that quiet moment, Imani made a silent vow. She would continue to fight for justice, not out of a desire for revenge, but because she believed in the transformative power of truth. Every step she took, every reform she helped implement, was a tribute to her father's legacy, a legacy that deserved to be honored by a future built on integrity and compassion. "I will not allow the darkness of betrayal to define me," she whispered into the stillness. "I will let the truth be my guide, and in doing so, I will help rebuild a world where honor prevails." Over time, the turbulent storm of controversy began to subside. The company, once mired in scandal and corruption, started to show signs of genuine reform. New policies were put in place. Transparency became a central tenet of its operations, and the voices of those who had been silenced by fear were finally heard. Imani's tireless efforts, along with the support of her steadfast allies, had sparked a movement that reached far beyond the confines of the corporate world. It was a movement for accountability, a call for a return to values that had been forgotten in the relentless pursuit of profit. Yet for Imani, the true resolution was not measured solely by external victories, but by the internal reconciliation of her own soul. The long, arduous journey had changed her irrevocably. She had learned that the pursuit of truth was never simple. It was fraught with painful choices and difficult sacrifices. The moral implications of her actions weighed on her like an ever-present reminder that every act, every decision, could have far-reaching consequences. In the quiet moments of reflection, she acknowledged that while the truth could liberate, it also demanded a heavy toll, a toll measured in broken relationships, lost innocence, and the scars of betrayal that might never fully fade. One afternoon, after a successful press conference that heralded the first major steps of the reform company, Imani visited the very park where she often found solace. Sitting under a sprawling oak tree, its branches stretched out like protective arms, she allowed herself to simply be, to feel the gentle warmth of the sun, the soft murmur of life around her, and the steady beat of her own heart. In that peaceful sanctuary, she pondered the lessons of her journey. "I have been both the victim and the avenger," she mused quietly, "and in the process, I have learned that the true measure of strength lies not in the absence of pain, but in the willingness to rise, again and again, in spite of it." The moral reflection was not merely a philosophical exercise for Imani. It was a practical guide for the life she intended to lead. She resolved to be more cautious with her trust, to cherish honesty even when it was hard to come by, and to always seek understanding before passing judgment. "The world is full of shades of gray," she wrote in her journal that day. "No one is entirely good or entirely evil. It is our choices, the decisions we make in the crucible of adversity, that define us. I choose to be a seeker of truth, a guardian of integrity, and a believer in redemption." As the weeks turned into months, Imani slowly rebuilt her life. The scars of betrayal were still visible, etched into the fabric of her being, but they served as reminders of her resilience rather than marks of defeat. In quiet gatherings with trusted friends and reformers, she spoke openly about the challenges she had faced, encouraging others to stand up against corruption and to demand accountability from those in power. Her journey became a beacon for others who had suffered in silence, a call to look beyond the surface of appearances and to seek the deeper, often painful truths hidden beneath. There were moments, too, when the memories of loss and betrayal would surge forth unbidden, a harsh reminder of the price of truth. On such days, Imani would walk along the river, watching the water flow steadily past, carrying with it fragments of yesterday and the promise of tomorrow. She understood that healing was not a destination, but a journey, a slow, deliberate process of coming to terms with the past while forging a path toward a brighter future. In the reflective quiet of those solitary walks, Imani often recalled her father's parting words, spoken when she was but a child. No matter how dark the night, the dawn will always come. Hold fast to your truth and let it guide you. With each sunrise, she found renewed hope, a reminder that every end was also a beginning, and that even the deepest wounds could eventually give way to growth. The resolution of her long and painful narrative was not a neat, tidy conclusion with all questions answered. Rather, it was a mosaic of experiences, moments of triumph intermingled with lingering sadness, acts of forgiveness tempered by the hard lessons of betrayal, and a steadfast commitment to the pursuit of justice despite the cost. Imani learned that the moral implications of her journey were as complex as the human heart itself. They could not be reduced to simple absolutes of right or wrong, but instead existed in the rich, often painful interplay between duty, love, and the relentless quest for truth. Now, as she looked out over the park, where children played and life moved forward with gentle persistence, Imani allowed herself to feel gratitude for the journey, even for the betrayals that had once seemed insurmountable. Each experience had forged within her a strength that was both delicate and unyielding. She knew that the legacy she had fought so hard to reclaim was not simply a matter of exposing corruption. It was about restoring faith in the values that bind us together as a community, as a society. In the soft glow of the late afternoon sun, Imani closed her journal and stood up, feeling lighter than she had in months. Though the scars of the past would remain, they were no longer a source of bitterness, but a testament to her resilience and her unwavering commitment to truth. With a final deep breath, she whispered a quiet promise to herself. I will continue to be the guardian of my father's legacy and the seeker of justice. I will honor the truth, however painful it may be, and use it to build a future where integrity is cherished above all. And so, as the day slowly gave way to a peaceful evening, Imani stepped forward into the unknown with quiet confidence. The path ahead would surely be fraught with challenges, and the moral dilemmas of her journey would continue to test her resolve. Yet, armed with the hard-won wisdom of her experiences and the unwavering belief that even the darkest nights are followed by the light of dawn, she was ready to face whatever the future might hold. In that reflective moment, Imani embraced the full measure of her humanity, the pain, the joy, the loss, and the hope, and in doing so, found that the resolution of her story was not an ending at all, but the beginning of a new chapter in a life dedicated to truth, compassion, and the eternal promise of redemption. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more meaningful stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.